before we bring Hatem on, or as we do, let me remind people that next week, delegates will be gathering here in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention to formally anoint Vice President Kamala Harris as the party's nominee for President of the United States. They will be greeted by mass protests organized by the March on the DNC Coalition under the banner Stand with Palestine, End U.S. Aid to Israel. And the coalition's call to action accuses the U.S. ruling party of, quote, financing genocide in Palestine and war in multiple countries, continuing the mass incarceration of Black and brown people, deporting millions of immigrants, and neglecting campaign promises made to the oppressed communities who represent their voting base. And so, of course, now we have with us Hatem Abudayyeh, who is a spokesperson for the March on the DNC Coalition. Hatem is also a Chicagoan, and he is founder and current national chair of the U.S. Palestine Community Network, USPCN, which has been a leading force in organizing Palestinians and allies to protest U.S. support for the ongoing Israeli genocide of Gaza. And regular viewers will remember that we had Hatem on the live stream. I think it was at the end of November. And Hatem, we're very happy to have you back again today.
Thank you. I'm always honored to be here.
Thanks, Hatem. And Hatem, before we get into some of the sort of substance of the protests and the mobilization, I want to start with some of the breaking news around just the effort to organize this march next week, these marches actually, during the Democratic National Convention next week. The first march is scheduled for Monday, August 19th, and it's to be followed by marches on Wednesday and Thursday next week near the venue, the United Center, which is, of course, the big arena where the Chicago Bulls play on the west side of Chicago, for the sports fans out there. And so on Monday, so just 2 days ago, a federal judge in Chicago denied a motion by march organizers to use a longer parade route that would take them closer to the United Center. The organizers argued in their lawsuit against the city of Chicago that the shorter march route that's being imposed by city and federal authorities would violate the First Amendment rights of the protesters to have their views heard. And I also understand that until today, the city of Chicago has still not issued the permits for the marches. So Hatem, just briefly give us an update on that situation and what your response is to the judge's ruling on Monday.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is that, excuse me, organizing works. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Organizing works. So we put a lot of pressure on the city attorneys when they first denied our permits. They tried to bury us onto Columbus Drive, which is like 4 miles away from the United Center. We sort of, laughed at that immediately, rejected it immediately, and sued in federal court. It wasn't out of the kindness of the city attorney's hearts that they decided to put us within what we call sight and sound of the United Center. They did it because we put political pressure on them and because we sued them in federal court. So we won a part of this battle, and they had to offer us an alternate route that was within sight and sound. We will be marching in front of the United Center. The challenge, though, is that we have an expectation that there will be tens of thousands of people in Chicago next week protesting the DNC. And so their route is only a mile long. Our proposed route was more like 2.4 or 2.5 miles. And the challenge there is when we leave Union Park, a historic park on the west side also, and we do the 1 mile route, by the time folks get back to the park, there's going to be thousands of people there who haven't even left. And so, yes, you might have upheld the First Amendment rights of the people who get to walk in front of the building, and are able to make the message known: stop US aid to Israel, stop the genocide, free Palestine. But what about the thousands who never leave the park? Their First Amendment rights are not upheld. That was our argument. We felt like it was a compelling one, but the judge ruled, and we're very disappointed in the ruling. Of course, she ruled that the city met the legal standard of sight and sound, and they were no longer violating the First Amendment the way they were when they first offered us to be 4 miles away. The other challenge, which is as large of a challenge, is that as of today, we've got $60,000 to $80,000 worth of contracts with sound and stage companies, portable toilet companies, all these things that you need to stage a mass protest in a park like we're trying to do next week. And those are all on hold because they haven't even given us the park permit that we applied for back in November. So we're supposed to hear from them today. Electronic Intifada might get a scoop if I get any messages in the next few minutes. But we're very, very hopeful that we get the permit for the park today so we could sign those contracts, and we could at least be ready to be staged there. And then we'll deal with the political pressure that we will continue putting on for the next 5 days to try to get the longer route. It's not just in the best interests of the Coalition to March on the DNC or my organization, the United States Palestinian Community Network, or only the protesters. It's really in the best interest of the city, because one of the arguments as well is that if you force all those people into a shorter route, if you force them to make turns onto very narrow side streets in Chicago and not on the main thoroughfares, you get into a situation where protesters might see that there's an open street, an open area, they want to go through it. We asked the police directly, what will happen to those folks if they did that? What will happen to those folks if there's a log jam, a bottleneck, and they're frozen for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes and they try to break out of it? Will they be subject to arrest? And the cops said yes, ultimately they would be subject to arrest. And so we said, why do you want to put the city in that situation? Why do you want to put our protesters in that situation? And so it's in the best interest of everyone that they give us a longer route despite the ruling of the judge.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk a little bit about the March on the DNC Coalition itself, and how you've come to this point. The coalition is broad, but Palestine and the Palestinian community are playing a central role in it. Ending U.S. support for Israel is the headline demand of the coalition, but it's not the only one. Talk about the March on the DNC Coalition and what these demands are.
Yeah, so Nura, we've known for a long time in this country what kind of support we have from different communities here. I was lucky to grow up in a family that had friends who were considered themselves Arab nationalists, but also internationalists. So I was exposed to the Puerto Rican independence movement and the Black liberation movement, the Native sovereignty movement, immigrant rights movements, all of these other social justice issues that are so important to all of us as well. And so we've always had their support. We have the support of the entire world. We've seen that in the last 10 months. We've seen that in the 2.5 decades that folks like Ali and I have been organizing, in the 6 decades that our mentors have been organizing. And so it's not surprising that when we came together with this 210 organizations, we might have as many as 250 that have joined the coalition by next Monday, that they understood the primacy of Palestine right now at this moment. But we also are going to be addressing those other issues: workers' rights, immigrant rights, Black liberation, stop police crimes, police accountability, LGBTQ rights, reproductive rights, women's rights, workers' rights. All of those issues will be represented with beautiful posters and banners and speakers from our stage. And remember, USPCN is not a one issue organization, and our community is not a one issue community. The Coalition to March on the DNC was formed last April of 2023, the very day after they announced that the DNC was going to be in Chicago, and so we joined it before there was any genocide, and we were going to be a part of that protest because we believe in the goals and objectives of it. We believe in the political perspective of it that the Democratic Party has taken for granted all of our communities for a long, long time, especially the Black community, Mexican community, other immigrant communities, and the Arab and Palestinians as well. So it is going to be a really beautiful, rich, broad coalition number of protesters that will be there from all different physical abilities, all different immigration statuses, children and seniors. It's the reason we fought so hard for this permit, to make sure that everybody who feels like they want to make their message heard about Palestine, about any of these other issues, can do that, and they can be safe and secure doing that. And we provide that safety and security ourselves. We keep us safe is a slogan that comes from the Black Liberation Movement, and that's what we do. We're prepared for that. We have a robust security and marshals team. We have the greatest legal institution in the history of this country, the National Lawyers Guild, that are working with us shoulder to shoulder, that will be there monitoring the police to make sure that they don't violate our rights, and to be there to defend folks if there are any arrests. They've done that for 10 months, have not taken a penny, all pro bono work, all of these National Lawyers Guild taking on the cases of all these young people who have been arrested at the protests. It's incredible stuff, and Monday's going to be a sight to behold.
And Hatem, I mean, just context for people who, unlike us, are not Chicagoans. I think you have the accent to prove you're a Chicagoan, Hatem. But Chicago is the largest. The Chicago area, the greater Chicago area, is the largest Palestinian community in the United States, and certainly one of the largest outside Palestine. And people don't often know that because they talk, there's a lot of knowledge, even around the world, that Michigan, the state of Michigan, is a major center for the Arab American community, which of course it is. But uh, and of course, there are a lot of Palestinian Americans in Michigan, but it's actually Chicago where the largest concentration of Palestinians is. And um, uh, it's really, there's a lot of energy in that in
And
terms of the.
it's also politically really the hub of the Palestinian community in the United States as well. Most of the national organizations have their national offices in Chicago. Most of the conferences that happen, yes, because it's centrally located, but also because of the size of the community. We think there's about 80,000 Palestinians in the greater Chicago area. There was an article published in November by National Public Radio, I believe, online, that really talked about that community. A lot of folks who are colleagues of Ali and me have done studies and research, have been able to count this community, because the census obviously doesn't count us very accurately, and studied it so well for so many years. Including our mutual friend Louise Kankar, who's a professor at Marquette. And so yeah, I mean, there's a rich history. We're part of not only the social fabric of the Arab community broadly in this country, but really the social fabric of Chicago and Chicagoland. We dominate now in terms of population in the southwest suburbs, as opposed to Chicago proper. But you know, USPCN and my day job at the Arab American Action Network, we still consider ourselves an urban organization. And I don't want to leave 63rd Street yet, Ali.
Let me ask you, the Israel lobby is not taking too kindly to this organizing effort around the DNC. And we're seeing some of the usual smear tactics and scare tactics against community organizers, some of the usual suspects, the Anti-Defamation League and other pro-Israel groups like the JUF, the Jewish United Fund of Chicago, which is a local Israel lobby group, but it's also one of the biggest nationally in terms of these these city-based federations. And I know from my own experience how aggressive they have been. And they've been calling on police to crack down. You even received a threatening letter. Hatem, talk about the attacks by the Israel lobby on this nationally significant, I would say internationally significant organizing effort to bring the demand to stop the genocide to the Democratic National Convention, and how you're responding to it.
Yeah, so we all know that the enemy works 24/7 as well as we do. And so especially in Chicago, the JUF is a very powerful organization, the Jewish United Front, the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Chicago, I believe it's called, and of course, the racist Zionist ADL, who we know because our partners in other communities, including folks from JVP, have done a lot of research about how they support anti-Arab, anti-Muslim organizations, how they attack the Black Liberation Movement for being in solidarity with the Palestinian cause, and in this case, they did a press conference last week, attacking the coalition to march on the DNC by name, attacking my organization, the United States Palestinian Community Network, by name, and saying that we were going to bring violence to the streets of Chicago with absolutely no evidence. Of course, they showed a bunch of videos of protests from other places, and they said that this is what's coming to Chicago, a level of fear mongering that we've seen from them a lot over the years, but really just absolutely disgusting. We got wind of the press conference the morning of, and so we put out our own statement about it, and we were able to really steal half their press that day. We went and we commented about their press conference, knowing what they were going to say, and refuting it on the spot, essentially, with a number of our spokespeople. So that was a really good hit for us. It was important to do that because we know why they do it. They are in the business of supporting war, supporting genocide, supporting the killing of 40,000 people and the injuring of 100,000 and the displacement of 2 million. And they don't have any shame in publicizing it. And so what they do is they try to criminalize the folks who are fighting to stop that war and stop that genocide. And the way they do it is that they weaponize anti-Semitism. The JUF is claiming that they're putting out a report, or maybe they have already, and they're going to talk about the increase in anti-Semitic incidents. And all of our pro-Palestine activities and protests are going to be listed as examples of quote unquote anti-Semitic incidents, which is proof positive exactly what we're saying, that they're weaponizing anti-Semitism to try to criminalize us and criminalize our movement and fearmonger in the community. One of the worst of them all, that the ADL and JUF supports, is an alderperson in Chicago, a member of the city council for those outside of Chicago. Her name is Deborah Silverstein, and she was in a meeting about the public safety committee in Chicago in front of the police superintendent, the top cop, as we say. And she said, should Jewish organizations and businesses shut down and leave the city next week? I mean, what kind of horrible, horrible racism is that? To say that publicly like that. And so what happens in those situations is that you put a target on those organizers, you put a target on those organizations, you put a target on an entire community. Wadia El Fayoumi, the beautiful 6-year-old baby boy who was killed, stabbed 26 times and killed, was because of what was happening after October and the horrible, horrible narrative and rhetoric that we heard from the media, but also from a number of Democratic Party legislators, including our governor in Illinois, Pritzker, including Senator Duckworth, and including other Congress people who were, criminalizing our community, criminalizing the Palestinian resistance, criminalizing, Palestine generally. And so the response from the racists and the white supremacists and the Zionists is to attack. And they killed Wadir. They shot those three young men in Vermont, the 20-year-old Palestinian young men in Vermont in November, only a month after the genocide began. And they have been writing nasty emails and leaving nasty voicemails for a lot of us in this country for decades, of course. But nobody has ever come to my home.
Mm,
And there was a note that was left at my home, a threatening note in the foyer of my apartment building. And so, we went public and said that the ADL and the JUF are responsible. They establish this atmosphere of fear mongering, and this is the result. The result is that they came to where I live.
yeah.
So we have to be very careful in the movement, always be secure, because the enemy has a lot of resources. But we're holding ADL and JUF responsible if anything happens to anybody in our community, anybody associated with the coalition of March on a DNC or USPCN or anything. And again, we keep us safe, we protect ourselves and our community and our movement, and we will do that. But the ADL should be held responsible for this note, this hateful, threatening note. And that's the story of the attack from the Zionists.
And Hatem, I mean, I can only echo that, and we all have to be very aware and very careful. And I watched some of that press conference by the pro-Israel groups, and it was truly hateful incitement. Smearing all of us collectively as terrorists, as terrorist sympathizers, extremists, as anti-Semites, and riling people up. I mean, race baiting and real incitement. But listening to you, Hatem, one thing that really strikes me, I don't know if you saw that 2 weeks ago we had the great historian Ilan Pappé on the live stream to talk about his new book, which is about the Israel lobby, the history of the Israel lobby going back to the 19th century. And one of the key points that he makes in that book and came out in our discussion is how Israel and the Israel lobby has always been an elite project. And in the sense that even the early Zionists, like Theodor Herzl, when they went around Europe and they went to the union halls and to the Jewish communities to try and build support for Zionism, they couldn't. They were laughed out or told, get out of here. We're not interested in this. They got support from, governments, from people at the top. And if you look at the city of Chicago today, which is probably typical, I mean, it's sort of in a way representative, that's still how it is. The people are in the streets, and you have mobilized in demonstration after demonstration, tens of thousands of people in the streets of Chicago. And the Zionists simply cannot do that. They cannot mobilize people in the streets. They cannot mobilize a broad coalition such as you are part of. So all they can do is incite and try to rile up extremists on the fringe to raise tensions. They claim they're
Absolutely.
concerned about safety, but they're actually trying to incite tension, incite violence, so they can say, oh, look, we were right, and to incite a police crackdown. That is what they are doing.
Right. And the
So,
other thing that's interesting is we get a lot of questions about that. Are you worried about counter protesters and that sort of thing? And in all honesty, the local Chicago Coalition for Justice in Palestine, which is leading the protests on Wednesday next week, has organized almost 50 protests itself since October. Altogether, the institutions within that coalition and others, solidarity organizations, all told together, we've organized about 100 protests since October. And they ask about counter protesters in Chicago. The racists that are here, the white supremacists are here. They don't try to protest in the the Black liberation movement that comes out against police crimes and against police killings. They would never dare do that. And the Zionists and the racists and the white supremacists would never dare try to counter protest our mobilizations either, because like you said, Ali, they don't have the forces. They can't build the coalitions, and they realize that we've got tens of thousands that mobilize, and they have 8 octogenarians who are across the street with their Israeli and US flags occasionally. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely true. Again, we know we have the masses on our side across the world. We definitely have the masses on our side in the United States. Every single poll that we've seen in the past probably 6 or 7 months, a couple months into the genocide, have talked about how the majority of the American public is saying stop
Yeah.
the genocide. The one thing that we talk about all the time is the fact that Israel is finally being exposed, even in the United States,
Hatem,
as the criminal pariah state
yeah.
that it is. I got to run, to be honest. I just want you to all to please plug the protest next week. Please plug the DNC Monday at 12 noon at Union Park, Randolph, and Ashland in Chicago on the west side. Wednesday at 3:30 p.m., Thursday at 5 p.m. Coalition of March on the DNC online. And join the tens of thousands that will be here next week, because we're doing our best to help free Abu Bakr and the rest of our family in Gaza and in the rest of historical Palestine. Thank you for
Hatem.
having
We
me.
know you're
Please,
we know you're busy. Thank you so much. We'll put the URL, we'll put the
please,
website address up for the march, and
please,
we'll have you back soon to talk about. We
inshallah.
still have much more we want to talk to
Yeah.
you about, but you've got important work to do. So
Absolutely.
go do it. And thank you for
Thank you.
joining us today,
Thank
Hatem.
you
Thanks,
so much. I
Hatem.
appreciate
See you
it. Take care.
soon.
Thank you. Thank you. We still have I think we should still talk about
I
some
think
of
we
the things
should.
we wanted
Yeah.
to talk about, and we'll put up, it's the website is March on DNC 2024.org.
Perfect.
I'll drop this in the chat, Tamara. Oh, you beat me to it.
She's on
Tamara
it.
is much faster. She's on it. Yeah, and that has the times and the dates. So of course there's going to be a big turnout from Chicago and the Chicago area, the Palestinian community, this broad coalition, which is bringing together people from all communities. And I know that there are people coming from all over the country. There are people driving in and busing in. So it's going to be big. And the point is that the people at the top of the government of the United States, the people who could make the phone call to stop the bombs that Abu Bakr is surrounded by, are going to be in Chicago, and they are going to hear from people.